I know this is not Darth Vader's helmet, but it's the best I could do. Well, it's Mr. Mashanya here saying hello and talking about the next cycle that we're going to get into, which has to do with logical fallacies. Now, speaking of logical fallacies, there is probably nothing more illogical right now than me wearing this helmet during the entire video. So let me take that off, and you can look at my helmet hair. Once again, Yoda says hello. He was a little afraid of me wearing the helmet, so he was meditating underneath the desk. But we have just gotten through talking about our appeals. We've looked at some of the essentials of argument. We've looked at some of the appeals. Our next cycle deals with the kind of opposite. Yoda, get out of the screen. Gets into the opposite of what we're talking about in terms of appeals. It gets into what we call fallacies, which are errors or defects in reasoning. Let me share my screen with you just for a moment and give you a little bit more detail. Okay, let me get this out of here. Now you don't have to join this this Menti at all, but fallacies are all around us. This is something George Bush said, previous president, after the 9/11 attacks. He said this several times. He said, either you're with us or you're with the terrorists. Now that sounds really good, and it was really persuasive, but wasn't exactly logical because there could have been another option. So these things called logical fallacies are defects in reasoning. Things that are fallacious do not follow a logical pattern. And you can see here, 2 is a number, 1 is a number, therefore 2 equals 1. That type of reasoning has some mistakes in it. Fallacies are literally everywhere. You will see them in commercials. You will see them when you get into arguments with your parents, when you might be using them yourself. You might see some of these fallacies and say, hey, what is wrong with that type of reasoning? I hope that this will show you that fallacies are a problem. So fallacies can be, they're basically taking the appeals that we've already studied, and those are good. We want to use appeals. We want to draw from the right types of character to develop ethos. We want to seem credible and honest and have the right motive. We want to tap into the needs and values and even emotions of our audience because that makes an argument relevant. That's pathos. And we want to have sound reasoning, good evidence, and logical cause and effect, which develops our message and logos. But when we push the boundaries of those appeals beyond a logical border, we can degenerate into a fallacy. For example, this is a logical fallacy. It is using evidence that doesn't maybe necessarily follow a cause and effect. Notice it says we couldn't find a 9-year-old who stood taller than this line. Just because you didn't find them doesn't mean that person didn't exist. That's an appeal to ignorance. You'll learn a little bit more about that shortly. Some of our fallacies are fallacies of character. Their ethos gone astray. For example, Justin Bieber has a lot of ethos, perhaps, or at least he used to. But what does he have to do with makeup or nail polish? What makes him an expert on that? Really nothing. Somebody's just trying to align his authority and his fame with their product. It happens all the time. It's just not sound. It's a fallacy. Fallacies can also be emotional. Name calling, where you're attacking somebody emotionally, calling somebody lazy, dirty hippies might get your point across and might make an impact, but it doesn't necessarily logical. That's an emotional type of fallacy. So I asked this question in the past, what's more important, being valid or being persuasive? They're both important. People go back and forth. Maybe you have a different take on this, but we want to be valid, which means logical, and we want to be persuasive, which means we're kind of emotional and effective. We have to balance those things out. So our question for this cycle is, how can you create stronger arguments by avoiding fallacious reasoning? We want to understand, analyze, and begin to evaluate fallacious reasoning and argument. We want to become better arguers, being able to think through people's claims and deconstruct them and see where are these fallacies, or is the reasoning sound? So, and I'm back. So what do you have on your Google Classroom coming up? What should you be expecting? Well, level 1 is really the most important level. That's what I'm asking everybody to do, young Jedi. This is where you're going to be completing 2 things: the guide to logical fallacies and the Google form, the fallacy hunt. That is the minimum. That'll give you a really good working understanding of 12 very common fallacies. There are hundreds of them. If you go into law or you get into debate, you might want to explore more of these because there are tons of them. I kind of love fallacies. I'd love to teach a logic course because you're going to be shocked how often you hear these fallacies coming from people and media all around you. So for the guide to logical fallacies, it's a hyperdoc. You're going to watch the video on the left, and on the right, create your own handy dandy guide and definition for what you think that fallacy is. There are 12 of them. After you complete your guide, you could use your guide along with it. Then you're going to go to the fallacy hunt. And there are 12 different memes, quotes, and you're going to see if you're logical enough to identify each fallacy with the example represented. Feel free to use your notes. Feel free to use your guide. And then you'll see how logical you are. That's level 1. If you want a deeper dive, there is an Edpuzzle link that goes a little further into some of the fallacies that we talked about and some of the fallacies that we didn't talk about. It's about 10 minutes. There's some questions embedded in it. If you like fallacies and you like logic and it's kind of got your mind turning, dive into that Edpuzzle. And if you want to go to the deepest dive, level 3, I've created a Padlet for you and your peers to post fallacies that you find or create. Maybe you had an argument with your friend and you said, oh man, they used a fallacy on me. Then you could post that text. Or maybe you're watching an advertisement and you saw something show up on a web page and you say, oh, look at that ad. That's a fallacy. That's an appeal to authority. That's appeal to a false authority. Post it on the Padlet. Don't tell us what the fallacy is. As you're looking at the Padlet, feel free to comment beneath each post and see if you can identify what the fallacy is and why you think it is that fallacy to make your case. Again, that's optional. That's level 3. That's for the Jedi Masters. But I wish you well. I'll be online during our class time for you to pop in and ask questions. I'm hoping maybe down the road we'll have a time where we can come together. But since everybody's moving at a different pace and things are so asynchronous, I'm not really demanding anybody to be online at a certain time. The only thing I need you to do is after you read the instructions during our class time, please register your attendance by clicking on the Google form for that day. That is super important because by the next day at 8 a.m., I have to send that attendance on to the administration, and they might be following up with you. Some of you might have encountered that if you forgot to register your attendance. So stay logical, use the form, and I hope to see you again real soon.